He was called the King of Good Times, a larger-than-life tycoon who built a whole empire on beer, glamour, and what seemed like limitless ambition. But how does a guy who was the symbol of Indian success become the country's most wanted fugitive? Well, let's dive into the story of how it all went so spectacularly wrong.
At the very heart of this story is a frustration that so many people feel. If an ordinary person, say a farmer, can't pay back a loan, the consequences are swift, they're harsh. But when a powerful person defaults on an unbelievable scale, well, the rules just seem to change, don't they? It's a contrast that really makes you question the entire system.
And the scale of this debt, it's just mind-boggling. Over 7,000 crore rupees. Now, for context, 1 crore is 10 million. So we're talking well over $1 billion US. I mean, at the time, that was enough money to fund India's entire rural roads program for a year. This wasn't just some bad loan. It was a black hole threatening to swallow up a massive amount of public money.
So yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Was this a visionary businessman who just got crushed by a brutal market? Or was there something much more calculated going on here? To really understand the fall, you gotta start with the dizzying heights of his rise.
Now, Mallya wasn't exactly a self-made man. He didn't start from scratch. He inherited a whole kingdom. But what he did with that inheritance, well, that's what made him a legend.
So the whole thing starts with his dad, Vital Mallya, who took over the United Breweries Group way back in 1947. Vijay was literally born into this empire. And then, after his father's sudden passing, a 28-year-old Vijay Mallya is thrust into the chairman's seat. He inherits this massive business and, you can imagine, even bigger expectations.
And boy, did he deliver. Here's the thing that was so smart about his strategy. Mallya understood that he wasn't just selling beer. No, he was selling an aspirational lifestyle. He made the Kingfisher brand mean glamour, excitement, the good times.
So, how did he do it? Especially with a ban on alcohol advertising in India. Simple. Brilliant what's called surrogate marketing. He launched Kingfisher water and soda just to get the name and logo everywhere. He sponsored huge sporting events, created a Formula One team, and of course, the most famous of all, he launched the Kingfisher swimsuit calendar. The brand was absolutely inescapable.
And that just shows you how huge this thing became. The calendar wasn't just some marketing gimmick. It was a full-blown cultural phenomenon. It was the platform that launched the careers of future Bollywood superstars. Under Mallya, Kingfisher wasn't just a drink. It was the center of the universe for glamour and aspiration in India. But of course, Mallya's ambition didn't just stop with liquor. He wanted to conquer the skies. And this decision, this one move, would ultimately become the anchor that dragged his entire empire down.
And in true Mallya style, the launch of Kingfisher Airlines wasn't just some cold business decision. He apparently announced to his board that he wanted to gift an airline to his son, Siddhartha, for his 18th birthday. It was a move that was, equal parts ambitious and just audacious. When it launched in 2005, Kingfisher Airlines was like nothing India had ever seen. We're talking pure luxury. But while passengers absolutely loved the experience, the business model was just bleeding cash. The costs of providing that 5-star service were astronomical. And get this, the airline never once turned a profit in its entire existence. Not once. Then came Mallya's next big risky move. To get a license for international routes, he needed an airline with 5 years of domestic experience. So what does he do? He buys Air Deccan, an ultra-low-cost, no-frills carrier. It was the complete and total opposite of the Kingfisher brand. He basically bought a profit-focused bus service and tried to turn it into a luxury limousine. It just alienated its own customer base and saddled him with massive debt.
And this brings us to the multi-billion rupee question. How did an airline that was hemorrhaging cash from day one, and remember, never once made a profit, convince a whole group of public sector banks to lend it thousands and thousands of crores? While the answer seems to be a cocktail of personal charm, political influence, and one very, very optimistic piece of paper. And this right here, this is a huge piece of the puzzle. The loans were given against the Kingfisher brand value. Now, the bank's own internal teams valued that brand at around 160 crores, but an external audit firm, Grant Thornton, came back with a valuation of 4,100 crores. It was this hugely inflated number that was used as justification to just keep pouring more and more public money into a failing company.
And then, well, the whole house of cards just started to collapse. Employees went without salaries for months. The airline defaulted on payments for fuel and airport fees. Checks that were given to vendors started bouncing. And then it came out they hadn't paid over 150 crores in taxes. Finally, the banks had no choice. They had to declare the massive loan a non-performing asset.
And what made people absolutely furious was this crazy contrast. While his company was completely falling apart and employees were struggling just to get by, Malia's extravagant lifestyle didn't slow down one bit. He's hosting massive parties, he's running his F1 team, and he's still drawing a personal salary of 33 crore rupees from the airline. The king of good times was living just fine, even as everything else burned to the ground. So with the empire crumbling and investigators closing in, the stage was set for his final, most incredible act. As all these legal and financial walls were tightening around him, Malia made his most audacious and controversial move yet. Okay, just look at how this all went down. In October 2015, the CBI issues a detain notice. But just a month later, that notice gets mysteriously downgraded to simply inform. Then, on March 1st, 2016, right as banks are finally moving in to seize his passport, Malia is already at the airport. The very next day, he boards a flight to London, and he was gone. And then, once he's safely in London, Malia drops an absolute bombshell. He claims he had met with the finance minister before his departure to try and settle matters, a claim, by the way, the minister denied. Well, this ignited a huge political firestorm, with opposition leaders demanding to know how such a high-profile figure could just leave the country right when he was about to face the music.
Okay, so he got out. What's happened since then? Has there been any justice at all for the thousands of crores of public money?
Well, the years since had been this incredibly frustrating legal mess. Malia was arrested in London, but he got out on bail. He has expertly used the UK legal system to delay and fight his extradition back to India. Every now and then he'll tweet out an offer to pay back the principal amount of the loan, but, and this is key, never the interest, which now makes up a huge part of the debt. The fight to bring him home is still going on to this day.
And that brings us all the way back to the beginning, right? To that final, lingering question. Is this just the story of one man's massive ego and alleged fraud? Or does the whole saga of Vijay Mallya expose something deeper, something way more troubling? A weakness in the very system of banking, regulation, and accountability that was supposed to protect public money in the first place. A system that allowed the king of good times to keep the party going long, long after the music should have stopped.